Welcome back to Easily Explained, where today we will be talking about domain and range. So let's get started. So the domain is the set of input values of a function, while the range is the set of output values of a function. Some other names that mean the same thing as domain and range that we've talked about is like domain is your set of x values. If you think of in a graph or in an equation or in a table, the x value is what you input and the y value depends on that input. So the data can be displayed in any sort of way. It can be displayed in a graph, in a map that we looked at in the last video, or a table, even an equation sometimes. And you should be able to identify the set. It's always a set, just like for our function, we wrote out the entire function relation values. For example, if we had a comma 20, b comma 30, c comma 40, and d comma 50. If that is our relation and we're asked to identify the domain of that function, we make a set of all our input values, a, b, c, and d. And then for range, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So if you think about a graph and you think about the coordinates that you're given on a graph, which usually look a little something like this, but they're usually numbers, so like 2, 4, you know that the first is your x variable and your next one is your y. So it's an easy way to identify whether the value is an input domain or whether it is an output and a range. We can also do the same thing and identify the domain and range with a situation given. So this is our function situation. Blake earns $25 an hour that he works. So we want to identify the domain and range values for the situation from 0 hours to 6 hours. So if we had just cut this part out, then this situation would lead to an infinite number of ordered pairs because there's no limit on how many hours that Blake can work for. So that would make it a little bit more difficult to express all of the values of the domain and the range. So that's why I added this specific limit. All right, so first we want to identify the x or the input and the y or the output. So these are also basically what domain and range mean, but sometimes it's a little bit easier to visualize with just x and y because we have more practice with that. So the x value, you can think of that as your independent variable, the thing that is going to make it change. So the hours is our independent variable because the hour doesn't depend on the money. The money depends on the hour. So your domain values are the amount of hours, and we've already specified that it's going to be from 0 to 6. And then the range value is the total amount of money that he makes. So now that we have identified which variable is the domain and which is the range, we can easily make a set of values. All right, so our domain starts at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, and now for our range values, we actually have to write an equation and plug in all of the domain values and see what we get. So, like we said in previous videos, writing an equation is pretty simple. Y is your total amount of money. Then slope is the rate of change, so 25. And it depends on the hour, which we're going to call X. And since there's no initial startup bonus, it's just y is equal to 25x. That will be our equation, and we're not going to worry about a y-intercept. All right, so now we can plug in all of our different x values or domain values that we've written in the set over here and come up with all of our range values. I went ahead and filled in all of our range values. So now this is our answer, because in domain and range you just need a set of values. And this is the equation that we used to come up with all of our range values, since they weren't specifically given. Now this was a situation. We could have also just been given a table. So if we were given a table, we still need to do the same first step by identifying that the hour is going to be our input and the total money is going to be the output. But it would have been easier. We wouldn't even have needed this equation, because all of these on this side, on the left side of the table, would just be our domain values, and the right side would just be our range values. We could also have been given a graph. If we were given a graph, it would have been very similar to the table, in the sense that we would just be given all of our values, and we wouldn't even need some sort of equation or something to come up with the domain and range values. We would just have to look at our x value and our y value and then combine them all. Now it's time to practice. For each function, identify all the domain values and all of the range values that are shown or that are specified for. Alright, so let's start with number 1. Since we're already given that this is x and this is y, we know that this will be our domain values and that this will be our range values. So let's get started with our sets. Alright, so for domain, we can list all of the x values given, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And for range, we'll do the same exact thing, but for the values on this side of the table. 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24. Now for set number 2, our domain is just going to be all of the values on this axis, the x-axis. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 again. And our range will actually, it's not going to be all of the values on this axis, because some of our values of data don't go all the way up to 50. It goes to 40. So it's going to be from 0 to 40. And also notice that there is actually a data point on 0, 0. I made it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So that's why we started our data with 0. And we are also going to start a range with 0, 10, 20, 30, and 40. And for the last one, our domain for the situation, the car travels 50 miles per hour. Identify the domain and range for 0 to 4 hours. So our domain is going to be the number of hours, since that doesn't depend on anything. That's like your input value. So 0 to 4. So same domain for all of these situations, but very different ranges. Our range is just going to be all of the values. So at 0 hour, the car is not going to travel any miles. 50, 100, 150, and 200 is our last range value. Congratulations, you are now an expert at domain and range. We hope this video really helped, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!